Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program is a guest that's hopefully going to expand our horizons, especially as we find ourselves approaching middle age and beyond. We begin to scratch our heads and think to ourselves, have our lives really turned out the way they want to? I've even had friends, for instance, that seem to be thinking to themselves, you know, I kind of reflect on my entire life, and there were many things that I wanted to do that I never accomplished, many ways that I wanted to be that I never created, and I kind of wonder why life just didn't turn out the way I want to. In some cases, in that personal transformation process, we find ourselves running to the library, the bookstore, trying to find those particular things that will help inspire us to move in the direction that we want to see magic become created. Perhaps you've even spent hundreds, even thousands of dollars on weekend seminars only to find yourself living what most people would consider to be a Groundhog Day of just repetition and routine. Well, we want to explore the possibility of what we can do about that, and is it possible that we can break that cycle of habits to create a whole new set of circumstances that'll uncover and unsheathe that life that we feel is just passing us by? Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is an international tax consultant turned entrepreneur. He started writing The Universe, which is a newsletter that goes out to more than several 100,000 people daily. And he's joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today to talk about his book, Infinite Possibilities. It is the art of living your dreams. And I'd like to welcome to our program our guest today, Mike Dooley. And Mike, thanks for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Thanks, Daniel. Nice to be with you.
You bet. What's that like to write a newsletter that goes out to hundreds of thousands of email subscribers each weekday, and what is it that newsletter has?
You know, it's funny because I used to wonder when I was just getting started. In the very beginning, my database was all of 36 people.
Oh, we know that one.
And I used to think, I wonder what it's going to be like, optimistically thinking, when I have 1,000 people who read it, and 10,000, and 100,000, and 250,000, and 1 million. And I always kind of just felt like I just wouldn't know what to do with myself. But as is true of most creations and manifestations and major life changes, it happened very, very incrementally. The 36 didn't go to 36,000. It went to 46, and the 46 went to 106.
Then it's 7 months later, then it's 9 months later. Ooh, I'm up to 500.
Now it's 9 years later. So it's been a long, long time. And so I kind of got used to what I'm doing, and all along the way there's been indications and feedback from people or life that I'm on the right track to keep doing it, that it's much appreciated, that I am a good writer, because, I was plagued with doubt and insecurity and fear in the beginning, like anybody starting out on a brand new trip. But all you can do is take those baby steps and then look for or detect what your feelings are, the intuition, the logic. Does this make sense? Am I on the right path? Does it feel right? Mm-hmm. And for me, the answer was always yes, even though I did it for free back then and to this day. But now there's a whole business that's attached itself to it, and my own business, and it's become very, very successful.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned something that's interesting because you talk about things happening incrementally. And I was just having a discussion with a friend of mine about 2 months ago just about that very topic about business, and that people tend to have the illusion in some cases that when you start a business, that there's somehow this linear path that gets you from point A to potential success.
Oh, yeah.
But like you, and like us even doing this program in the last, going on 6 years now in February, as a matter of fact, it is far from a linear process. We started on terrestrial radio. It just wasn't working for us. The overhead grew as far as, paying the station out. And the show was being eaten alive, by the sponsors who supported the show to get their message out, so the content was being watered down way too much. And we just felt, hey, this just isn't working. And it wasn't until we pulled online, again, that would have been maybe a roadblock for a lot of people to even say, I surrender, I quit, it just isn't working. But we decided to become more and more creative about what we're doing, and now we get to not only serve our audience, but our sponsors as well, and we're happier for it. But that was far from a linear process.
No, that's a great story, and there's so many lessons to learn, and too many people, come away from watching The Secret, the film, or reading the book, or other things that I've been in, and they have the sad misperception that, like, oh, great, all I need to do is have a vision board, and I'm going to go from making $6 an hour to making $600,000 a month.
Right.
And it's like, yikes, look, we are divine, spiritual, all-powerful beings. All things are possible, but we need to work within our own set of beliefs of what's reasonable and what we can expect, which doesn't mean we have to settle for less, but it does mean, if you're driving a Honda Civic right now, let your next car be a BMW, not a Lamborghini. Pace yourself a little bit while still stretching to territory that will thrill you, and then never stop kind of negotiating the path in front of you, because I had to do the same thing. I wrote for free, and I was like, what's this, man? This is not getting me anywhere. Then I started speaking, and I was speaking for free to Rotary clubs and Toastmasters and small unity churches. And it's like, keep on knocking on doors. Don't watch The Secret and say, well, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a best-selling writer, I'm going to be a millionaire because of my writings. That's not the message. Mm-hmm. The message is to focus on the generality of abundance, creative, fulfilling work, health, and let the universe figure out how. Mm-hmm. It's the bane of our existence, worrying about or insisting upon the narrow straight line, the rapid instantaneous manifestation, because we only limit an otherwise unlimited universe that is fully capable of taking into account our other priorities, our other beliefs, supporting or not supporting, to get us in the shortest, quickest way to where we most want to be.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mike, one thing I want to do note here is, and you were in the movie The Secret, if I remember right.
Right.
And now, through doing this show in the last couple of years, what's been fascinating is how we've taken a turn to, just as you start out in your very first chapter about thought, the power of how the brain and the mind work for intention. Now, honestly, what I will say to you, and I'm glad to have you on the program, is there had been times that I had brought up the movie The Secret through our podcast, and even when we were on Terrestrial Radio, I said, there's something about that really bothers me. And I don't think it was necessarily the movie itself, but it was how the message was being received in, say, the community that we were in. And I even sometimes say, it's the hippie community that basically likes to run around living off other people. Well, this secret says that I could just sit around here and I can intend, and the universe is just going to give it to me. And that became very frustrating to me.
It's
and
frustrating
in ways I was
to me.
actually
You're
beating
dead
up
on. I agree with you. I'm in the same boat.
So I felt like I was beating up on the movie, but the point that I was making wasn't so much that, is that the movie somehow conveyed a message, and I'm saying the perception as how it was received.
You're
all you
totally
had to do was sit around and intend.
Yeah, wait. Have a vision board and just wait for Oprah to call.
Right.
It's like it does not happen like that. And what people sadly misunderstood, not everybody, but they got the impression that that it would be that the universe would then live their life for them. But implicit throughout the creation of The Secret is that you're going to continue living your life, dancing life's dance, being out there in the world where life's magic can reach you. So you keep living the same way you used to live. To a large degree, you keep doing what your peers are doing. The Secret is not an excuse to cop out and not make the cold calls because the universe is going to bring the right person to you. No, make the cold calls, join the leads group, do the networking at Rotary clubs, but also have an end result. Whether it's a new direction for your business, more abundance, a new relationship, improved health. Have an end result and visualize that, playfully pretending in your mind's eye that end result has already been achieved. Meaning, number one, you're not going to be thinking about during this visualization how it's going to come about. But you then throw into process, literally, the magic of the universe. Wheels start turning, dots start getting connected. I mean, this is why athletes have always used visualization, because underlying it, our thoughts become things. This is why the power of positive thinking has long been accepted and embraced by every aspect of society. But there's something powering positive thinking. And if we ask the hard questions, we find they have easy answers. Thought powers positive thinking. It powers visualization. It powers the so-called law of attraction. But of course, you need to be out there in the world, moving and grooving, so that you can then be within reach of these so-called coincidences and happy accidents that will be barreling their way towards you.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I like, too, Mike, is that in your book, Infinite Possibilities, again, in the last 2 years, it's been very powerful on our show how I've personally transformed from the idea I never thought of the fact that my mind and the way that I think, for instance, has perhaps created the outside life that I have, even in action. Now, the power of that statement, especially as you talk about thoughts become things, it's amazing how very simple that is. You know, I started saying to myself, I can't believe it's that simple. Now what do I do about it? But as you talk about in your book, knowing thoughts become things, there's an area that as you start becoming attuned to what you're thinking and to what things become real, you start to ask and question yourself, why is this happening? What belief am I holding that is holding me back?
That's beautiful, and that's where the world is going now, because as much as there was perhaps some warranted criticism of The Secret, it reflected people's waking up to the truth of their power. Like you just said, people are saying, hey, wait a minute, there's a connection here between me and my outlook and the things that have happened in my life. The next step in the equation is the association of responsibility. Hey, wait a minute, if I'm this powerful, then I'm responsible for the consequences, and I have the free will to choose accordingly, and I can't be blaming my boss, my government, my spouse, my parents anymore. If I want to put myself in a place of full power, I need to be there. And so these two things are kind of happening in tandem all over the world. People are waking up to it. Exciting time to be alive.
Very much. Now, as people have been reading your book about infinite possibilities, especially as we do this show again, there's some tremendous, hard, long-lived beliefs when it comes to approaching, 50 years old, for instance. Give you an idea, Mike. We go out and we do trade shows. It is fascinating when we throw up our banner, how people stop and you watch them mouth out what's on our banner. Beyond 50. And they're just mesmerized, like, oh, my God. It's like somebody goes into the supermarket knowing what they're going to buy. 20 minutes later, you see the same person spaced out like they have no idea why they're there.
Yep.
And they look at this, and then we go to engage them. And this is one way that we get people on our newsletters. We meet them face-to-face and tell them about the program and what we're all about. Well, I'm not 50 yet. See, there's a stigmatism there about that particular age. And now think about this. These are people also that they've been around and they think, and this is due to, I believe, also societal program, especially with the advent of the industrial age, which seems to be in decline, of the idea that you're running out of time and that life and dreams can no longer be fulfilled. What is your take on that, Mike?
Well, all of this comes from kind of the limited age-old thinking that's been passed down since literally the story or the analogy of Adam and Eve, which was all about human beings using their physical senses alone to interpret the world around them, to pass judgment, as if the physical world around us was bedrock reality, which is absolutely not the case. It's all illusions, if you will. The time and space, the jungles of time and space, the here and now is literally the same as a dream we have at night, except it's got continuity and it's got co-dreamers. But if we don't understand that, and we think we're looking at bedrock reality, and we think, oh my God, my life is limited by so many hours, it changes our entire perspective. It puts us into fear mode, and it puts us into a place of reacting to our own creations in the world around us instead of deliberately molding them. It totally stripped us of our power. But this was the evolution of consciousness, if you will, in the dream of life, and it's all good and well. We are all eternal spiritual beings, so nothing's been lost. But as I lay out in the book, if we can begin understanding the truth about the nature of our reality, it will pierce through these false limiting beliefs about aging, about the kind of person I am. It's like, what kind of person are you? You're a person who thinks you're that kind of person. Don't limit yourself, whether it's with regard to your health or your earning capabilities or sexuality. There are no limits other than what we buy into. And incrementally, first by being aware of that, incrementally we can start pretending, visualizing, acting as if our life is changing. And however silly that sounds, this is how to spark major life changes, because you're actually affecting the mechanics of manifestation rather than view it as trying to change the world around you by pretending. You're changing your thoughts, which will then, in due course, change the illusions in this dream we call life.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mike, you describe especially specifically about that acting as if, and I'm sure that anybody who's picked up a book that deals in personal transformation or has attended seminars that talk about personal transformation, that is one of the things that consistently comes up as act as if. Mm-hmm. Now, in your book, when you describe that, you actually talk about it's one thing to say act as if, but you need to, that's the key, that's half of the word action. Describe specifically for our listeners what that is when you talk about acting.
What we're basically, and this just came to me as you were talking, acting as if is simply an extension of visualizing, the visualizing that athletes do, which does far more than help us run faster and jump higher. It can surround us in new business opportunities, new circle of friends, etc. So taking it one step further from your dark and quiet room with your eyes closed and you're seeing your life unfold as if your dreams had already come true, you bring it to the fore, to the here and now. And what you might do if you're struggling financially and you're really scared, act as if this was not your circumstance. Go out and splurge on a magazine, Town and Country. I'm not saying spend money you don't have. There's ways you can pretend. We'll talk about that in just a second. Without spending money. But splurge as if your circumstances were different. If you need more money, then give somebody panhandling a little bit of money. Even if it's 50 cents, even if it's a dime, the act of giving. Or another example, overpay your mortgage, your minimum mortgage once a month, you round it up to the next dollar, round it up to the next $5, $10, or $100 if you can do it. Don't pay the minimum, because that action says, this is where I'm at in life, this is all I can do, I need to pay the minimum. It's like, no, you don't. If you act differently, even if it's rounding it up to the next $5 amount, while you perform that action, you are suspending any invisible, and they are invisible, limiting belief that may have told you that you were only up to paying the minimum, that your finances were pegged and you don't know where tomorrow's money's coming from. You're perpetuating your situation when you kind of keep behaving the same way. But if you can act as if your dreams have already come true, just stepping a little bit outside of perhaps the norm, as you define the norm, then your inner witness, this orchestrator that enables and assembles all of your beliefs, empowering and otherwise, takes notice. Like all of a sudden you're not paying the minimum car payment, the minimum credit card payment anymore. Even though you're only rounded it up a tiny, tiny bit, this is different. Something's happening. My life is changing. And this kind of sets you up in a place of expectation, anticipation. It generates new thoughts. Awareness is aroused. And these new thoughts, these expectations, not only start drawing a new experience into your life, but they start bolstering and empowering beliefs, thereby erasing the invisible limiting beliefs. And if you want, I'll talk about how to do an act of faith without spending money, but I don't want to run on too long here. Mm-hmm. Shall I do that?
Absolutely, please.
Well, I talk about in some of my different books an experience I had with a woman who was at one of my VIP dinners in Brisbane, Australia a few years ago, and she was telling me she wanted a relationship. She was sick and tired of being all alone, and so she wanted to do more than just passively visualize that she had a new man in her life. She started acting as if he was already there. She said, I stopped parking in the middle of my two-car garage, and I started parking on my side, making room for him on his side, even though at the time there was no him. She said, I stopped sleeping in the middle of my king-size bed, and I started sleeping on my side, making room for him on his side, even though there was no him. She had no date, she had no lead, she had no she was preparing the way. This creates a whole new network of synapses for your thoughts to follow in your brain. She started occasionally setting 2 plates out for dinner at home, even though she ate alone. You don't even have to go all the way and put food on the other person's plate, but pretend they're there. And she was telling me this story with a Cheshire smile on her face. And when she was done, she turned to the gentleman to her side and said, "And here he is, proof that it works. You know, I met him 3 months ago. I dragged him to your seminar, and now we're here at dinner. We're living together." And even better than that, 3 months later, she said, she sent me an email, "We're engaged." Mm-hmm. And then Rhonda Byrne from The Secret wanted to put that story that I shared in my audio program in the book version of The Secret. And I said, well, you know, I can't tell you you can do that. I need approval from the lady who gave me the story. And so I asked for it, and she replied, said, "Absolutely, tell Rhonda to go ahead. And by the way, we're married." This stuff works. We've been pretending and playing all of our life. One of my notes from the universe said, you know, here's what I tell, you know, this is the universe writing to somebody, Daniel. Here's what I tell Daniel, people who aspire to living in fabulous abundance. Mm-hmm. Couldn't you just pretend you're a multimillionaire? Mm-hmm. You know, right after you're done pretending you're not. Tally-ho, the universe. That's a typical note from the universe, written from the universe's perspective, tongue-in-cheek, to get under your skin, because is it true or not that those people who are not multimillionaires act like they're not millionaires? They pretend like they're not millionaires. This is not reality. This is all illusion. This is a dream, and we can change our dream on the fly. That's the story of the prodigal child. So stop pretending you're poor, you're sick, you're lonely, and start pretending, just if through nothing more than a simple act of faith a day, a token act of faith, that you're loved, that you have friends, that your fortunes are turning around. It will seem silly. It will seem futile. But if you really want change, this is how you spark it, in the dream of life.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting, especially when you talk about abundance. You know, the first thing people think about generally is money. They would like to have more income. I'd like to win the lottery. And I go back to author of the best-selling book series, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, who we've had, Robert Kiyosaki, on our program. And he talks in his book that you need to change your money language. And that's the same thing you're talking about here as far as changing your language. And that is, a lot of times when you go to someone or someone comes to you and says, you know, for instance, it could be your kids, you know, "Mom, Dad, I'd like to have, you know, this money to go do this. I'm sorry, I don't have any money right now." Okay? Now listen to that language, and what he says is you need to change that and say, "That sounds like that's important to you. Let's find out how we can find the money." Just that brilliant. Simple transformation, and I promise you this, Mike, and this is to our listeners out there, I started putting that into play. And it's not only amazing that you'll find the money, but the money becomes available somehow. It's the weirdest thing.
It is weird. We live in a dream. The impossible can happen, and it does every day.
Mm-hmm. Now, and that's what's interesting, is to get our listeners to understand that you can tell what your beliefs are, and you say this in your book, by just listening to what you say. Talk a little bit. Elaborate on that for us.
Well, our beliefs, virtually all of our beliefs, are invisible, and that's confounding to the people who are afraid of their invisible limiting beliefs, because they're like, well, I don't know what they are, so how can I change them, and how can I work around that? And I point out the rather obvious fact that if you just pay attention not only to what you're thinking, but to what you're saying, to your kids, to your spouse, to your best friend, to the mirror, and if you pay attention to how you're behaving. Are you always buying the cheapest, most generic brands of everything in the grocery store? Mm-hmm. Are you pinching every single penny? What does that action say about your belief in the inevitable avalanches of abundance, cash abundance, that are rushing towards you? Mm-hmm. Not much. It says you don't have that belief. And so there you go. You know, I believe that my finances are limited, that it's hard to make money, that opportunity for making more money is rare, I'm getting older, and it's not going to get any easier. It's like, wait, that's a mouthful, and that's the kind of thing you can uncover by the kind of beliefs you can uncover by paying attention to your wandering mind, the words you choose, and the way you behave. And then, once you nab those beliefs and you realize what they are, just write down on a sheet of paper the opposite. I'm getting better and better. I'm getting smarter and smarter. Money is being drawn to me. Money, it's like money grows on trees. Everything I touch turns to gold. I'm surrounded by wealth and abundance. I have tons of free time. I always have the right thing to say at the right time. I'm so photogenic. say these things, write them down on a paper, start saying them, and when you see opportunities in your day-to-day toings and froing, start acting like they're your beliefs. If you see somebody taking a picture and heretofore you've hated your picture, you stand up there front and center and say, take my picture. I love my pictures. I'm so photogenic. That might sound preposterous, and I'm going to an extreme right now in the kind of declarations you might make, but this is how you reverse your so-called negative, invisible, self-sabotaging beliefs. You start playing the other end of the spectrum, and you start installing these new beliefs that will wipe them out by action, acting as if, pretending. Just like you pretend when you visualize yourself running a fast race or making more money, you pretend in the dream of life, consciously, physically. You splurge, you make comments. I'm looking skinnier and skinnier, aren't I? The pounds are just falling off, aren't they? I've been so fortunate lately. I keep meeting really fun people lately. The people that say that kind of stuff start experiencing that kind of stuff, and they very often forget they started the whole process when those comments were wistful thinking.
It's so funny, too. I keep remembering the Buddhist precept is the idea is that what you think, you become. And what you become, you start creating habits, and your habits become beliefs. And in realizing, if you just take that simple precept and go, okay, so it all started inside of me. It's interesting, as you said earlier in the program, Mike, how we tend to be reactionary to events that are outside of ourselves without paying attention to the trigger inside of ourselves that causes those reactions.
That's true. It's just, what it boils down to is that all of this stuff is so easy. It's been taught from Buddhism to even Christianity to perhaps every religion at its core, at its heart. They do speak of life's beauty, of the grandeur, and we need to stop making it complicated and stop making it difficult and realize, for me, the buzzwords I used, my banner, if you will, is thoughts become things. It doesn't get any easier than that, and it's absolute. There are no mitigating factors. Your thoughts unfailingly become the things and events of your life, bar none. Doesn't matter what God judges. It doesn't matter what you deserve. It doesn't matter who you were in the 4th century. Your thoughts become things. I spend so much time on this in the beginning and central part of this book because the best way to empower yourself is to know the truth about the nature of reality and stop giving your away to wishy-washy fairy tales or to beings outside of yourself. And then you start realizing the truth is I am God. God lives within me. God's more than me, but I am pure God, because what else is there? And if I'm pure God, I've got pure power. It doesn't make sense that I'd be here to be judged and sentenced. It makes sense that I'd be here to experience this fantastic adventure called life in time and space. This is what's going on. This makes sense. Then you see what has always been rumbling around in your heart, that, people are good. Everyone's trying their best. Some people come from very difficult backgrounds, and there's no point casting stones at them. But when you look at your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, your clients, vendors, customers, you can see the spark of magnificence in everyone's eye. Everyone is of the divine. Everyone's trying to find their own little place in the shade. Sure, there's some ugly stories out there, but look, we've got 6 billion people, and the ugliest of ugly stories, you could put those folks on just the fingers of a few hands.
Right.
The evidence is overwhelming that life is good, that people mean well, that we are spiritual beings that will live eternally, that we chose to be here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
The other thing, too, is stop paying attention to all those outside messages, for instance, that tell you that you less than what you are. And what's interesting about that statement, as I alluded to very earlier in the program, again, as we address the boomer generation, if you will, the people who are aging, the people that think, oh, geez, time is running out and I wished I had done those things. And and it happens with a lot of people who tend to, I guess, follow that linear process, if you will. What's interesting about that is you'll hear somebody, for instance, I'd really like to do this, and then I might say to them, well, just go do it. Well, I don't know, I'm too old for that. Or, maybe, for instance, they may be in a wheelchair or there may be a handicap. You have a statement in here in your book that I picked up on last night that I thought was really interesting because I've engaged certain people who've had, for instance, physical limitations, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reminded of a time that I was taking a broadcasting course out at a community college, and there happened to be a student there who was blind. Now, what was interesting about that is I was sitting in on an air check, and that is where basically you bring in a tape where the instructor listens to you actually disc jockeying on the air, but he just hears how you come in and out of the music, and then he makes suggestions on what you can do. Well, before he was listening to my air check, he was busy listening to the complaints of this blind student talking about how he couldn't negotiate this and that and the other within the studio, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then he walks out, and I'm kind of sitting there going, I don't think this kid has a whole lot of desire about this. And he says, you know, it really frustrates me that he's going to use his blindness as a precursor to say that he won't be successful. Now, here's what's interesting about this, Mike. A few years later, in 1999, I become a volunteer at Public Broadcasting that happens to have a service called Golden Hours Radio, a radio reading service for the blind that mostly was being ran, keyboards, electronics and all, by blind people.
Wow.
You know, and here's
it
this
just
kid,
shows you,
this
yeah.
kid, and here I'm sitting there, and I have blind people engineering my show, setting it up, doing things that I didn't know how to do, and I was just amazed by that. But anyway, going to your statement is this, and I always like to say this, which I actually got from the movie Scarface, is what from that movie, the quote is, "A day above ground is good day," but here what you say is, if you're still here, you're still worthy.
Oh, absolutely, and it's always a matter of focusing on what you have, not what you don't have. Very good.
Funny stuff. Now, go ahead for our listeners, and go ahead and give a few simple steps that they can take starting today to be able to move in the direction of having that fulfillment, that abundance that they would like to have and see and experience more of in their lives.
Well, the very first thing that I share with all audiences and readers is it's your responsibility to understand the truth about reality. You know, you can't put it off on your parents or the priest or the government or the schools. It's your number one job to know what's going on, and don't think that it's not knowable. It is knowable. People and seers and prophets and writers like myself have been talking about it since the beginning of time. You are divine. You are a creator. All things are possible, and this is through the power of your thought. You don't have to learn how to make your thoughts become things. You just have to realize they always have, and therefore they always will, so start thinking some better thoughts. Just do your best. Don't worry about the baggage or the negativity. Understanding the truth puts you in your place of power. Number one, then, once you've got grounded, is if you want to change, define what you want in terms of the end result, meaning describe your life as if the change had already taken place. You already lost the weight. You already quit smoking. You already have a new job, new friends, new whatever. And then, number two, after you define the end result, and that includes visualizing and, putting, vision boards are powerful. Use a vision board or a scrapbook. So once you've defined the end result in all of its glorious details, then it's incumbent upon you every single day to take some baby steps in the general direction of those end results. Don't worry about which direction you go, and don't worry about what steps you take. Just try to go to the best of your ability in the general direction of your dreams. You can even go in the wrong direction. So long as you're taking steps, your course will be corrected. And as you take steps, the energy, the resources, whatever you need to complete the journey will then be added to you because you started. The mama duck doesn't wait for her baby ducks to line up before she goes across the street. The mama duck just goes. And then the baby ducks, the resources, line up behind her. And that's what we have to do. And that's difficult because it can seem futile. It can seem scary. What do I know? How can I make it happen? I know no one. I only get paid an hourly rate. Go. Do something. Follow an ad in the paper, do a Google search, go out into the world in the general direction of your dreams, and then you will be brushed up alongside with a new friend, someone who inserts an idea into your head, who gives you a tip. The miracles will be unending as long as you stay on the path. You keep on physically moving in the general direction of your dreams, and that's it. Know the truth about reality, have end results. Don't worry about how you're going to get there, and then start with the baby steps, even though you don't quite know how they're going to be enough to take you all the way.
Mm-hmm. For those of you just joining us, we're talking with Mike Dooley, author of the book Infinite Possibilities, and that's exactly what it means, is that it's infinite and it's totally up to you. Now, as you were saying that, Mike, I was thinking two things. The first thing is, as you talk about reality, to see reality for what it is, Byron Katie, best-selling author of Loving What Is, and also the work simply says, believe it or not, and this is really true when you put it into action, reality is kinder than you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is, when you were talking about baby steps, I'm reminded of a time that I'm traveling on an expressway, and this was one that was in between a park and so forth, and there's 2 lanes going one way and 2 lanes going the other, and the average traffic speed is about 50 miles an hour. All of a sudden, traffic was slowed down to a stop. And I couldn't figure this one out until we got to the point where you could see what was going on. Mm-hmm. And that was simply this. It was a pair of parent Canadian geese walking 8 babies across this highway.
Well, I've got chills.
And they were taking their time doing it. And what was so neat about that experience is, they just figured, we've got all day to get across the street, and you guys are going to wait. And just watching the expressions of people sitting there smiling, to me, was a sense of inspiration to say that's exactly what we're saying to the listeners here.
Yeah,
don't get in the flow of traffic, because it's generally leading you in the direction you don't really want to be going. Take your steps and stay on course on your own pace. And so I was just reminded of that story when you brought all that up.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love hearing it.
Fascinating. Now tell folks where they can find out how to receive your newsletter, and what kinds of things do you see coming up on the horizon here for you, Mike?
Well, I send out a daily note from the universe, and you can sign up at TUT, like Tiger, Uncle, Tiger.
For KingTut.com.
Yeah, like King Tut.
Right.
And you'll see right away there's a place to sign up. We've got, in fact, the website's just been unveiled. We've got a social community now. You can opt. It's just an option to be part of that, and it's very Facebook-like. And, in fact, it's Facebook integrated, so you can post pictures at our site, and it'll be, pass through to your Facebook page if you want. What's coming up? Oh, boy, I've got more books coming up in 2010. I've got a world tour that's going to begin at a fast pace in January that will start out in California. It will last for 2 years, but I always go home in between most stops. So it'll last for 2 years, taking me back to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Europe, Asia, Russia, South America, Hawaii.
It's too bad you didn't list so many countries that you wanted to visit, right?
I know. Well, somebody's got to live this life. March, I'm going to take a group, and there's still space for 8 days in Cairo, Egypt, including a short little Nile cruise. In September, I'm taking a group to Tahiti. Lots of good stuff happening, and it's all reported at TUT.com, where there is all kinds of free resources. The daily e-zine is free. There's an Ask Mike forum. There's recommended reading off of the homepage. There's a resources link, so I can where I share with people the books that have rocked my world and helped to solidify my understandings. It's all good. It's all fun, and I hope to see your listeners there.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, too, as you say, I started the show and you're saying here toward the end about all the things that you offer for free, and I'm reminded of, the name eludes me right now, but we have the original producer who put together the original Woodstock concert on our program a few months ago.
Wow.
And we were talking about the difference between Woodstock, which was a phenomenal event in history and it was never repeated, and then within the same year, the concert at the Isle of Wight. And he says, well, there were 2 distinct differences between those concerts or those shows. A, when we produced Woodstock, of course people paid to get in, but we also allowed people who couldn't afford to get in to get in.
Wow.
But he says that's why the concert became what it did. It was really about the audience. And he says the reason the Isle of Wight became trouble, this was actually almost twice the size of Woodstock, 4 days in England, and that is that 70,000 people paid in of the more than 600,000 people who got in. And it was frustrating and it was violence. He says, when you set the intention that if you want to make money, then you're probably going to kind of get those kind of results. But I sent the intention with Woodstock as I just wanted a great event for the people. and that's why it became that. So when you talk about, for instance, putting out there, and I'm saying this for the listeners out there, and hopefully you'll be able to affirm this from your experience, that what you put out there for free with heart, intention, and spirit, which truly you will be paid for.
Oh, it's inevitable. They are linked together. It's implied. The universe, if you will, which is your greater self, knows that you can't be all that you can be without all of the dots being connected, including health, including abundance, including friends. So when you're out there shining your light, and you're not so worried about the details, who gets credit, where the money's coming from, those things take care of themselves. Follow your heart, and the money will follow, as the book title goes.
Michael Lang now is the person I was referring to, just came to me. So it's true that life is waiting for you, so what are you waiting for?
Exactly. There's nothing between you and the life of your dreams other than you. You and your thoughts. That's the only thing. And when you realize the truth about reality, another scary thing goes away. You stop thinking that life is a 50-50 proposition of survival. You start realizing that we are inclined to succeed. We are pushed on to greatness every single day. It's harder to fail than it is to succeed. It's harder to frown than it is to smile. And our lives are proof of this. We all have more money than debt. Generally, we have more friends than we are totally alone. We have health more than we're sick. This propensity to succeed is everywhere in nature. And so if we just loosen up a little bit, we realize that we don't have to sweat every little detail. Just have end results and be in action, and all of the nuances will take care of themselves.
So it stands to reason, Mike, that life is better and things and circumstances are better than you think they are.
Absolutely, which is a sad testament to where most people think life is and what life is. But it couldn't be. It could not be more beautiful. We could not be more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike, I know that you're busy, and we certainly here on behalf of the Beyond 50 radio program would like to thank you for taking the time to join us here on the program to talk about infinite possibilities. And again,
my pleasure, Daniel. Thank you. Thanks for the good work you're doing, and happy holidays to all of your listeners.
And you as well. Thank you. Mike Dooley, our guest today again, Infinite Possibilities, and be sure to sign up for his free daily newsletter, if you will, that shows you what those infinite possibilities can be for you. After all, you need to become inspired, so then that way you can take steps so that you can create the ripple effects that inspire others to know that they can do the same. We thank you for joining us. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. It goes out by email every single week. Also be sure to forward it to friends and family alike. Very entertaining, informative, and fun. Also, be sure to visit us at our blog. We archive our shows. That's right. You can listen to these at your convenience as well as forward them to friends and family as well. Just simply visit us at beyond50radio.com. Again, thank you for tuning in. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.